You know, some wisdom feels like it's always been there, right? Like it was carved in stone from the beginning of time. But then there's another kind of wisdom, the kind that's earned. And sometimes the price for that wisdom is just unbelievably high. We're about to dive into one of those lessons, one that was paid for in blood.
So here's the core teaching. It comes from the ancient Jewish sage Shimon ben Shetach, and he says, "Examine the witnesses thoroughly, and be careful with your words, lest from them they learn to lie." Okay, on the surface it sounds like pretty straightforward legal advice, right? Be a good judge, be a careful investigator. Makes sense.
But what if I told you that this simple-sounding rule came at a terrible, almost unimaginable cost? What did this sage have to go through to learn this lesson so deeply? That's the story we're going to unpack.
To really get the teaching, you first have to understand the man. And Shimon ben Shetach was a person of truly unshakable integrity, living in a very, very dangerous time.
I mean, the drama of his life is just incredible. We're talking about the Second Temple period, around 100 BCE. He was the head of the Sanhedrin, which was the supreme Jewish court. But get this, he was also the brother-in-law of the queen, Salome Alexandra, and her husband, King Alexander Yanai, was a tyrant who was actively persecuting and killing the sages. Shimon himself had to flee for his life to Egypt.
His entire life was this crazy tightrope walk between being at the very center of power and being hunted. The king tries to kill him, so he goes into hiding. Then his sister, the queen, manages to broker his safe return. And when the king finally dies and she takes the throne, they together usher in this golden age of justice and learning. He navigated the absolute highest levels of power, but as we're about to see, he never let it compromise his principles.
There's a perfect story that shows you his character. It's about a donkey. His students bought him one from a merchant, and when they took off the saddle, they found a massive, precious jewel hidden inside its collar. They were ecstatic. By the letter of the law, it was theirs. But Shimon? He insisted on returning it, stating it plainly, "I bought a donkey, not a jewel."
And the merchant's reaction says everything. He wasn't just grateful, he was deeply moved. He exclaimed, "Blessed be the God of Shimon ben Shetach." Shimon lived in a way that didn't just follow the rules. His actions made his values, and the values of his entire tradition, visible and beautiful to everyone he met.
So that's the man we're talking about, a person of immense integrity. Now let's go back to his teaching and break it down, because this is where we start to uncover the tragic experiences that forged this wisdom in fire.
His teaching really has two parts that are in this perfect tension with each other. First, examine witnesses thoroughly. This means you interrogate, you dig deep, you cross-examine, you find every possible contradiction. But the second part is a warning. Be careful with your words. Don't lead the witness. Don't give them a single clue about the answer you want to hear. You have to do both at the same time. And you have to remember, in the ancient world, justice depended entirely on words. There was no DNA evidence, no surveillance footage, no forensics. The testimony of witnesses was everything. A person's life literally hung on the words spoken in court. That's why examining them so thoroughly was so incredibly critical.
But for Shimon, this wasn't just some abstract legal theory. This was wisdom written in scars. He learned these lessons through profound personal and professional pain.
For Shimon, the tragedy struck even closer to home. At one point in his career, he had presided over the execution of 80 women who were convicted of sorcery. As an act of revenge, their relatives conspired against him.
They brought in false witnesses who accused Shimon's own son of a capital crime. And the court, following the evidence that was presented, convicted his son and sentenced him to death. Then, on the way to the execution, the witnesses broke down and confessed they had lied. Shimon wanted to stop everything, to reopen the case, but his son refused.
And what his son said next is almost unbearable. He told him, "Father, if you want to bring salvation to Israel through your hand, then treat me as a threshold you step over." He was saying that the law is clear. A witness who recants after a verdict can't be believed. Otherwise, anyone could be bribed or threatened into changing their story. He knew if his own father broke that fundamental rule, even for him, it would undermine the entire system of justice. He chose to die to uphold the integrity of the law his father championed. Shimon ben Shetach paid for his wisdom with the life of his own child.
It's just a devastating story, and it raises a crucial question. What does this ancient courtroom advice have to do with us?
Well, the truth is, we are all judges now.
No, really, think about it for a second. When do you act as a judge in your own life? The answer is constantly.
It happens when you're listening to gossip about a friend, when you're assessing a colleague's work, when you hear one side of an argument between family members, or, and this is a big one, when you react instantly to a headline on social media. In all these moments, you are rendering a verdict.
So, the most important point is this. We can take this sage's hard-won wisdom and turn it into a practical toolkit for how we operate in the world today. Let's break down what that actually looks like.
Here's how we apply it. First, don't be a lazy judge. Dig deeper than the first story you hear. Second, watch your leading questions. Asking, "What happened?" is completely different from asking, "Why are you always so careless?" The second question isn't looking for truth, it's looking for a confession. When you do that, you can actually teach people to lie to you, just to give you the answer you seem to want. And finally, remember his integrity. Remember the donkey. The law is the floor, not the ceiling.
This brings us to Shimon's most profound insight. He doesn't just say be careful because people might lie. He says, lest from them they learn to lie. From your words. He's saying that our careless words don't just find dishonesty, they can actively create it. The way you ask a question can teach someone what kind of story you're willing to hear.
And that leaves us with a powerful and maybe even unsettling final thought. Your words don't just find the truth, they can create it. The question Shimon ben Shetach leaves for us, paid for with a father's grief, is what kind of truth are you creating with yours?